So today we have a gift of art, of color, of design, and theater, all wrapped up in this delightful person called Dame Zandra Rhodes. I'm hoping that we can also get her to share some of her stories and journeys that make her and her work such a very important part of the world of fashion. So Zandra has put together a remarkable presentation, and we're going to share it with you. Anytime you're ready.
Okay, we'll start, and then you butt in when you think of stories, because we've known each other for a lot of times through El Paseo in the rain.
In the rain, yes, we've had lovely...
When it was rained out.
That could actually be an entire afternoon to tell you about the show that we almost didn't have.
Exactly. So we'll start off, and then you butt in as you think of things that you know apply.
Imagine asking me to be interruptive. I can't imagine it.
Right. Well, this is the first picture you see is a picture that was drawn of me by Mr. Doughton. Of course, it shows you my memory because I can't remember his first name this minute, and just is at the front of the book. My mother was a dressmaker who trained with Worth in Paris, and that's her with the glasses, the second along, and this is at the art college that I went to, and the picture's probably from around the 50s, and showing that I did have a background of seeing little dress shows going on and everything like that. And then I was always sketching, and it's a picture of me sketching in Austria when I was about 13, and then just one of my early sketches in my sketchbook. I then went to college and thought I'd be a book illustrator, but ended up really falling in love with fabrics, and I was taught by a wonderful woman called Barbara Brown, and I went to the Royal College of Art and trained in printed textiles. I didn't ever think I'd be going into fashion.
How hard was it for you to transition into fashion? Because I think people think, oh, they print fabrics, they understand, you just put clothes on a person's body and it works. How hard was that?
At the time that I left the Royal College, I'd got a first-class honours degree, and I had all my little folder with all my textile designs, and everyone I went to see said, well, we wouldn't sell any of those. They couldn't imagine how they would sell. And so I realized totally by that accident that I would have to learn to make the clothes myself. So I found another friend of mine who'd gone to the Royal College straight from being a librarian, and I knew he'd sympathize, because I thought, people say, you're a textile designer, you can't do dresses. And I thought, well, I know how I want the dresses to look, because I'm designing prints that have to take over the shape of the dress. And so I thought, well, like when I was at college, the people who were studying fashion didn't look more intelligent than I was. So I knew how I wanted them. So anyway, this is a picture of me when I had dark hair, before it went grey and then turned pink.
That was my question. So, what made it turn pink? No.
I originally had it green.
Green, right.
Because I wanted to... Riedel Sassoon brought out those lovely green wigs, and they all pinched your head. So I then went to Leonard, the hairdresser, and said, would you please do streaks in my hair? And I went with ordinary dye, because I thought, if you can dye sheep, you must be able to dye what grows out of your head. So that's originally how it all started. So that's me with one of my almost first collections, and this is a chevron shawl, and you can see that the pattern of the garment is how the dress shape, how the garment turned out from the print. And in fact, Evangeline Bruce, the American ambassador's wife, had one for herself, and she redonated it to my museum, and it's on show at the moment.
What was it that inspired you to do this chevron pattern?
It was in the hippie period, and everyone was wearing shawls. And I thought, well, why don't I do a print that's like a shawl?
Right.
And then cut out around the print. As a textile designer, I didn't see why you had to cut the print up so there was nothing left of it. So that's how that garment came to be.
And I may be ahead of your talk, but you hit on something that I was going to ask you. When you cut those fabrics out according to the pattern, did you ever use yourself as a canvas?
Oh, well, I walk around with big pieces of paper pinned to me. Before I invest in doing the screen, you think, does this look all right? Would this work? Would a neckline work here? And you cut it, and if it doesn't, you stick it back up again and try another bit till it works out.
Don't you think some designers should do that before they put clothes in the stores?
Okay. So this is my very first collection, 1969, and I did a great big circle that was as if it was all knitted. When you look closely, the design is as if it's been crocheted. And the bottom picture is of two amazing girls, Oksana and Miroslava Pristav. And these two girls said, oh, you've got to come to America with this collection. You'll make your fortune. So anyway, I had another American friend, the only American I knew, Richard Holley, who's one of the top decorators in Houston now. Mm-hmm. And I went over to America and I stayed in the flat with him. And I took my collection to American Vogue, and it was photographed on Natalie Wood, which is the other picture. And that's in the book, I think.
Yes, it is in the book. It's definitely.
Oops. And everything was hand-printed by me in my little studio with like my, 8-yard table, and cut out by me, and then I did the finishing. So that's the very first collection, and I sold it to Henry Bendel and
Geraldine Stutz and Henry Bendel.
Geraldine Stutz.
That's right. That's an era of that we don't have anything like that.
And then I started coming backwards and forwards from America.
Good. See, we gave you that wonderful chance. Before you go ahead, you talked about, your patterns and your prints. And in your book, your previous book, you mentioned that with your mother, this may sound really obtuse, but I have a point. You mentioned that with your mother, you did a lot of jigsaw puzzles because there were no TVs and people actually had to do things together. And later on, those jigsaw puzzles influenced...
Well, that led to my classic wiggle, yes.
Right, which...
I still like doing jigsaw puzzles.
Okay.
I think they're
but
great
that
fun.
You were inspired by so many things that you saw.
That happen around one, yes.
Right. That most of us don't observe. That's what's so remarkable, that you see everything.
So when I'm lucky enough, I love travel. I still don't know. Maybe if I'm lucky enough to spend time around here, one could be even more inspired by like the Ocotillos and all those things. Mm-hmm. And you never know what it will end up as becoming a design. The one you're looking at the moment was inspirations from Spain, and I used to do special makeup, and we did one where we did little pieces that stuck over the eyes that made them look like wonderful masks, and they come on with fans. And in those days, in the 80s, I used to do very dramatic shows where the music and the models would do things all together. They didn't walk down the catwalk like soldiers. So everything you're seeing here is around, probably the Spanish collection, I think, is around 84, something like that, for the collection that you're just looking at there.
So you're going to be showing us some of the different countries and cultures that have inspired you.
That inspired me.
And that is another thing that I want to ask you about, because everyone asks a designer, what is your inspiration? And often a designer doesn't really know, but they tell you something. But you have been inspired by your friends, by your journeys, by all the places
by my
that
friends.
you've been.
I've got friends that I like going sketching with. We're going to sketch and do watercolors and see different things. And it might not be anything to do with fashion.
Right.
It could be to do with, if it was Spain, it could be a wonderful fan that you see. It could be a bit on a matador's uniform. You never know where the inspiration comes from.
Okay.
At all. I think we've got a bit more, one of those Spanish ones.
Oh.
There you are. That's another Spanish one there. And they'd come on and they'd have to perform to whether it was castanet music, or they'd have to really look exciting and do things like that. Then, next one, I went to, I had a trip to Egypt, and with that we had the models walking on sideways as if they were hieroglyphics down the platform, you know, and it was quite a wonderful period of all of those things in the 80s. And then there's the second one along is my Egyptian leopard, which therefore the leopard skin came down as if it was down the front of the whole thing. And we've just done a whole lot of pins with a little leopard. There might even be some on the table below at the end. So that was my Spanish collection. I did one at the time that Princess Diana was getting married. They approached us top designers and they said that there's going to be a royal wedding and put some ideas in. And of course I did mine all gold and very exotic. It wasn't really considered for it, but in fact one of them was shown at the Met this season with the big gold swirls. And in the book there's a picture of Diana Ross in one of the gold swirl outfits.
Yes. And Diana Ross also did a cover, one of her covers in one of your white dresses, correct?
No, Donna Summers.
Donna Summers. I always
Donna
get
Summers.
them mixed up, sorry. Okay.
It's all right. I don't
so
remember
many
anything.
celebrities. So it's a good time for me to ask you, what artists have inspired you along the way? Are you ready to talk about that, or should we wait?
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, when I was at Royal College, Hockney was in his third year when I was a first year, and he did the painting of the generals with medals. So him and also Warhol have all been inspirational, like when I was using... I did use in one thing the neon man in the from Las Vegas,
Right.
and then I did the lipsticks. That was when I first started, and I went to people with my lipstick design, and no one touched them, whereas they were used in Valentino 2 years ago. So
And actually, you brought that with you to Fashion Week, and there's someone in this audience who bought that piece with the lipsticks
wonderful.
on it. I don't know if
good.
she's wearing it, but I know who it is.
Fantastic. So anyway, where we got to? Then in 1980 or 81, I was invited by the government of India to go to India and go to see all their print companies and all the different things. And I just found India very inspirational. And that's what led to the blue makeup, which was like blue Indian gods, and all the colour from India. And it's been a constant inspiration.
So you changed the actual fashion industry in India for a while. I've read.
Well, in fact, what happened was I made a lot of Indian friends and I did designs, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to sell in India now. No way, because they all wear saris. So I decided, I thought, well, why don't I do a range of saris? So I did saris, but I did them with the little bodices underneath that are called cholis. Well, I gave those shoulder pads, and then I gave panniers and big headdresses, and I think all the Indian ladies where I did the shows in Bombay and Delhi were a little bit shocked. But it was sort of, then someone once said to me, I think you actually started the Indian fashion industry, because this was 86.
Right.
And we didn't have India coming over and doing all the shows at that time. So that's my Indian period there. And then following on from that, I did the Grecian ones, and then I've used a lot of the top milliners like Philip Tracy and Stephen who do all the hats in Paris, but they were doing the hats for me in the 80s.
And that's where they started.
And these were leather bodices, and we punched the edges of the leather bodices, and that's also, you'll see close-ups of these in the book.
So,
Mexico.
Okay, go ahead. Then I'll
You go.
No, I'm going to interrupt you after Mexico. Go to Mexico first.
I mean, Mexico, the colour, and it inspired me to do a big print called the Mexican banana leaf, and the inspiration of drawing the wonderful walls that they did in ancient Mexico, where they put the little stones in the bits in between the bricks, led to the designs.
I wanted, before we move on, I wanted to sort of let everyone know that we all know as fashion as something that keeps changing, and of course you have to change fashion in order to make people want to buy more fashion. That's why it keeps changing. But the one kind of fashion that never really changes ever is ethnic fashion or cultural fashion, and you've always been inspired by that. which has impressed me, where many people just keep trying to make what they did last year a little better. I mean, you have all that history in your design. 'Cause
Well,
you're
I was
aware of it.
always inspired by this amazing book by a guy called Tilk on ethnic fashion, because when I started, I'd never learnt about grading and sleeves and darts, and my inspiration was, in fact, folk costume, and you could put a sleeve in a different way. So that's been one of my early inspirations, was that you didn't have to have them all fitting in and doing it the French couture way, but it could be done in a slightly different way.
Which is why I believe your fashions never go out of style. I mean, I think
I
that-
hope so.
I hope, no. But which is, I think, the reason that people collect your fashions, because they can wear them at any time and not look inappropriate or like they're from another world.
It's always wonderful when I go to somewhere and people wear dresses and they've saved it for that long and still
Right.
wear it, you know, and realise that they can get it out of the cupboard and wear it again, and I just have to add a bit in if it has to be made a bit bigger or a tiny bit shorter.
Elastic waist secret.
So mainly just talking about theatre on the runway, like the bottom corner, which is the cacti. I did my cactus and cowboy collection in 1975, before any of the American designers were doing cowboy collections. So that's one of my favourite, with the where I had them all coming out in cowboy boots, and I did the cowboy band, you know, the scarves around and everything. And then another one coming down the runway is my medieval one, where they had the gold bodices and the sort of curved headdresses. Right now,
Aha.
Well, we try everything on me, and in 1976 or 77, I forget which, you have to check out in the book, I suddenly thought, punk was going on the streets, and I'd like to do something that wasn't printed, and I could think about what I could do with safety pins and chains, and I did my very famous punk collection with the beaded safety pins. And of course, I had a shop in Mayfair in those days, and my partner said, well, if we're going to go this far, we'd better do up the whole shop. So we did a tree in the middle with torn jersey pieces on it, and we did the whole of the windows, and we didn't sell any of it. Here, this is a punk wedding dress that I did for that season. And then in the middle, who was my model long before the Rocky Horror Show, is Little Nell, who came to me at the age of 16 from Australia. And then 2 other pictures from that image. So after a month, we changed back to the printed dresses. But 15 years later, Versace did his dress on Elizabeth Hurley. So
married to Hugh Grant, right?
That's right. Was she married, or was she? No, she's a girlfriend, I think.
Well,
I think she was a girlfriend. But anyway, it made huge publicity, and Susie Menkes, who at that time was the head of the Herald Tribune, mentioned that my dress was a precursor 15 years ago, and she got banned for his show for 2 years. So now we go back to here. When Prince said, I was told that Vogue said, send him some dresses, we're going to photograph a very famous lady. I thought it was going to be Elizabeth Taylor. But in fact, it turned out to be Princess Anne, and these were the pictures that were on every cover of her announcement of her engagement. In 1975 or 4, I got phoned up by, it might have been Freddie or it could have been Brian, I'm not sure which, to come to my studio. And I had a funny little studio in an attic in Bayswater. And so I said, well, you'll have to come at the end of the day because I haven't got a fitting room, and my girls' machines were there, so they came in the evening. Of course, when I put the phone down and made the appointment, I had to ask my girls what they played at that time. Anyway, so I made the outfit that you always think of on Freddie, which is the pleated one, and I made 2 or 3 tops. And then, of course, I never heard from them until, in fact, when Freddie died. And then the picture that all his fans always liked was the picture of him in my pleated outfit.
And is that in your museum, or is that somewhere now?
The original pleated outfit is in that famous pop museum, I think.
In London.
But we remade, no, it's not in London. I think it's somewhere like Columbus.
The rock and roll.
The rock and roll.
Yeah. Or Cleveland. The heart of rock and roll is in Cleveland.
So I think it's in there, but...
And how about the second transition, which you just did again, right?
Well, I made the costumes that go into the film.
Yes.
That they wear. So that, and...
Are you giving credits in that movie?
I think I get credit. I don't know.
That's what we love about this woman. She doesn't know.
But usually they know that, so that's all right.
Wonderful.
I mean, once I did a charity show in London, and Shirley Bassey came out in my dress, and she said, I forget why, I'm not allowed to mention the name of this designer. And there was some reason, maybe because I hadn't paid for a sheet in the programme. But everyone around knew it was mine, so that was all right. And this is my famous one-sided dress, one on Lauren Bacall and on Jackie Kennedy. It's classically known as the 73 4C or something like that, because it was made in 1973, and it's the prints that I did in Australia.
Which print is that?
It's the Ayers Rock. It's the Ayers Rock in the centre of Australia that I drew.
Yeah, and that's something everyone is inspired by. How many people have been to Ayers Rock in Australia? And
it's wonderful.
I know, but it doesn't make me think of beautiful dresses. That's the point. It's wonderful.
And then this one that you all know, which is Donna Summers in my classic white dress. And this is Cher. In my pointy one, you saw it in calico, and this time you see it in chiffon. Diana Ross in the gold. Maybe it's time for a funny story here.
Oh, absolutely.
Diana Ross came to my store in London, and at the time I think I was wearing turbans. So I had a very exotic white turban, and she came and she bought a whole red, gorgeous, one of my pleated red outfits and a long chiffon skirt. Looked gorgeous. So I went to the reception of her one-man show at the time, and then I was driving through Beverly Hills with my girlfriend Joan Gwynn, and we see Diana Ross getting out of her car to go into her house. And Joan says, "Go on, you know her, get out and say hello. Get out and say hello." So I got out of the car and I took 2 steps up her pathway, and she said, "If you get 1 step nearer, I'm going to close this garage door down on top of you." I got back in the car trembling, and I have to tell you, she saw me in a turban. I had green hair with feathers on the end and high white boots. And I think she was doing a one-man record. I don't know, did she do one with Barbra Streisand? Maybe. Or was it Diana Ross? Anyway, she was with someone, she was doing this record. And she must have said to this person, "Do you know, this weird girl got out of the car." Well, anyway, I come down for breakfast the next morning, and my girlfriend Joan and her husband are sitting with bags under their eyes. They've been phoned up at 3 o'clock in the morning by Diana Ross with an apology at who she'd shut the door down on. And she came round for breakfast that morning.
Oh, she joined you for breakfast. Before you move ahead, I'm going to ask you a question. It's in your book, so it's not too personal, but I've loved watching your transition of your personal style. From the beginning of the book, even seeing you in, I think the first book, you had a little Austrian dress on and sort of pigtails and so forth.
Oh, yeah, when I was much younger.
How did that little girl wind up being so wonderfully colorful and, understanding how to really make a statement, which so many people have said, I can't seem to find my style. I mean, you have obviously.
I suppose, obviously, when people say, do you always wear your own clothes? And I say, well, if I don't wear my own clothes, what am I selling?
Yes.
If I'm going, sorry, I only wear Calvin Klein,
Yes.
then I'm selling Calvin Klein. Whereas I'm saying to someone, well, I make clothes that are wearable and I wear all through the time. And I always try out the makeups on myself. Some are a bit of a mistake, but you only learn that years later. When I still had to teach 2 days a week when my company was starting, and it was my punk look, and I went through Victoria Station in London with 3 eyebrows and square beauty spots. When
That's
I think
what I
back,
wanted you to tell us.
But I'm very lucky in that I'm sort of immune. You know what I mean? So that it's surprising people leave you alone in England. It's quite all right.
Yes. At the Fashion Institute in FIDM in LA, there's a very large picture of you and your collection, because you at one time were involved
I was
with
one
them
of the people on their board.
on their
yes.
board, and I was there 20 years ago teaching, and everybody said, did you see the woman with the pink hair? Well, within those 20 years, they all have pink hair.
I was going to say,
so
it's
like,
not,
that's right.
Once upon a time I get on a subway in New York, and you try and avoid when the school children are going home and they're all looking, and you have to just walk along in immune. People wouldn't take any notice now.
But every kid has colored hair of some kind, even a 10-year-old granddaughter I know. So everybody colors their hair, or does that. That's great. I just wondered how it all evolved. I didn't mean to digress.
We moved on.
Okay.
Dresses that I've made for Princess Diana. The off-shoulder one when she announced that she was pregnant. And then some of the other ones. She was very shy, actually. I didn't know her well. People say to me, did you know her well? I used to go in, I'd curtsy, I'd fit the dress, and then go away and make sure it got finished. So I didn't really know her. Here we are. Whoops. Oh, there we are.
It's moved.
Picture of Elizabeth Taylor in one of my dresses.
It's such a pretty dress for her. It's so soft, the pink. And if you notice in Elizabeth's dress, I noticed the lavender just perfectly matches her eyes.
Oh,
was that
yes.
planned?
No, I didn't even. Dakota, who's at the back, who worked on the book with me and researched so many photographs that I didn't even know about, would find all these pictures, and I go, I didn't know about that one, didn't know about that one.
Good.
So, sometimes they're pictures then we just discover them, or sometimes I knew about them. And this is Princess Michael in my dress and Princess Margaret. And then I did the pink-haired fairy on the top of Buckingham Palace Christmas tree. So I went to Buckingham Palace, and that's me in front of the Christmas tree. And then that was me with Diana when she did the sale, raising all the money for her charity. And then that's actually the pink-haired fairy and the Queen looking at the different ornaments on the tree in Buckingham Palace. Let me see, what else? Then we have another title here about changing. And it's true, the only thing you can count is change.
That's right. And there's another statement you made in your book that stuck with me, that everything is usually ugly in the beginning and then it becomes beautiful. Do you remember that one?
I think that's I haven't used that one for years. Right. I have to remember it.
But that impressed me that you use that. Can you explain that?
Well, you can sometimes try something out and it's considered ugly, and then change comes along and it's not considered ugly anymore, or different things. Fashion changes all the time. And you just have to hope as a fashion designer that you can just about move along with it. You can invent a look and it can be very popular a few years, then it changes and you've got to hope that you can slightly adapt, you know.
Right. Well, that's actually a good question, is that we talked about how your dresses they last forever. I like to say they're eternal, you know, they'll never go out of style. But you very subtly, as we move through this chronologically, will see changes. And what is it that makes you are a reflection of what's going on in the world, in society, actually.
Yes, you have to hope that you do something that people feel they want to be in, or the looks change. Like, for example, here, we went through a period of that fabulous Devore, you know, the velvet that gets eaten away. So as a print designer, the designs took a monotone look where you've got the silk and the velvet making the pattern in the whole dress, so it looks just that bit different. Well, then we went through a period during the, the 80s? During the end of the 80s and early 90s, when no one was really taking any notice of what I did. I didn't stop doing shows. I travelled across America doing shows, but they didn't seem to be hitting the front pages of the magazine in a way. And so I found this building in London in Bermondsey. And Bermondsey at that time was like, it was like the A's and B's and C's in New York, where you'd say, sure you want to go there? Well, anyway, I bought this big building and I persuaded the top architect of Mexico, Ricardo Legarreta, to rework it for me. And it became the Fashion and Textile Museum, where at the moment it has the exhibition of Zandra Rhodes 50 Years in Fashion that's on until the end of January. So that's the building. And my penthouse is on the top. My rainbow penthouse, say no more. What would you expect?
When you read Zandra's books, it's a series of essays by her friends and that people that have known her. And almost everyone who's been there have said that it's just a fantasy, wonderful place to be, and you did it so perfectly.
So I enjoy it, and it's got plants around the edge, so it's, you know, you feel you're in a garden on a roof. And we rebuilt it. There's an exhibition in Sweden twice a year on interiors, and the front lobby is about 6 times bigger than this room, and they rebuilt my apartment right in the middle of it as a rainbow apartment people walk through to show why are we coming into colour. So that's how I got to be, and it's not done yet, I'm going to do something for IKEA. So I'm very pleased that it will get all over the world. So while people were taking no notice of my work in the early 90s,
yes.
Being that I lived part of the time in San Diego, I got asked to, Ian Campbell, who ran San Diego Opera, said, well, why don't you design opera? Why haven't you done it before? And I said, well, Zeffirelli once asked me, but he didn't ring me back. So he asked me to do the costumes for the Magic Flute. And then after that, I did the costumes and sets for the Pearl Fishers, which have been into 18 towns across America. So this one's the Pearl Fishers. And then after that, I did Aida in Houston, and that went to San Francisco and London, and it had a big turquoise elephant in the middle of it, which that's the Grand March.
It's
with
better than the elephant in the room,
elephant.
Right? So this is a question I wanted to ask you, because if you notice when Zandra talks about these experiences, it's like, oh, opera, fine, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. What is it? How do you transition? I know how you study everything and watch it and learn, but what kind of transition did you find? What challenges did you find?
The thing that's magical about opera is you have an opera star who's going to be probably size 18. She might have been a 12 once, but she still thinks she's size 12. But once she sings, you're going to forget everything. So you have to put her in a corset, and then if she has a very grand cloak, it sort of catches at the side of the bust, so she can have a magnificent cloak and she still feels she's size 12.
That's right.
And it's really like I could go back to all my designs, print, and then, for example, when I did the Pearl Fishers, which is supposedly in India, in Ceylon, we bought very, very cheap polyester saris that already had borders and bits on them, and then we printed my prints on top of them, so they looked like Zandra Rhodes, but they were still saris. And we could do all sorts of magical things, so it's quite wonderful. And then when you're worked on by the music and colour, it really makes a lovely experience.
But don't you need to make multiple pieces that are the same? You know?
No, that's what's so good about opera.
incredible.
They do great big seams. You can't tell. They unpick them if a person's bigger, and they do them up again if they're smaller.
Okay.
Fill in a bit of the neck with
And they
net,
last.
and you can't see it all from the under the lights. It's amazing. It changes everything.
If you walk into a dressing room before any kind of theater, you're like, these are horrible clothes. And then
But
when you see them on stage,
When
they're
yes, I
absolutely
mean
wonderful.
they do remake when it gets worn out, but it is
Yes.
quite amazing just what you can do. And then, so after that, I built the museum because no one was taking notice of my work. Did opera because I was in San Diego, and then suddenly different things started happening. Like Sarah Jessica Parker wore one of my things for Sex in the City. This is Barbara Streisand in Meet the Fockers right at the end, and then I did her costume when she opened in the park in London this July.
Hyde Park.
I made her special costume for that, and I think she wore it again in New York for her concerts. So I started reinterpreting my stuff slightly more casually, shorter, looking as though it was more transparency, so that people got different ideas of it.
And you could see how much more contemporary things become.
Yes, so that maybe it would be look a bit more transparent, making them look a bit more multicoloured, you know. And then we opened my exhibition in London on the last month, 26th of September, and we had a very, very famous Hong Kong star from China, because I'm going over to China to do a range of lipstick furnitures and plates and things. And she took one look at the caftan and she said, I've got that. She'd bought one because these are all my historical garments, and she found a picture of herself wearing that at an opening in Hong Kong.
Oh, that's
so it
wonderful.
was fabulous.
And there's been a huge resurgence of caftans anyway,
Yes.
right? Which is great.
Oh, and I didn't realise, sorry, I'm wearing the same dress today of me at Buckingham Palace, getting my dameship.
Actually, you're setting a trend.
And then I've done prints for different people. Here I did a print for Anna Sui. And
Okay.
Anna Sui came to my show in, wait a minute, Circle in the Square, 73, 74. And she said it had always been a big influence on her life, and she got in touch with me. And if you go to New York, she's got a fabulous show on at the moment, and she's got one of my pieces that was an inspiration.
And
that's
you're
hanging on the wall.
You're going to be sitting, and I mean, you've developed a friendship, and
Oh,
you're
and
very
so-
similar in your, I believe,
It's
in
great.
your
It's great. And I'm
aesthetics.
going to do something with her at New York.
I think it's November.
It's this November.
Yeah.
It's a Friday. I can probably
I don't know this
Dakota at the
woman, but I
end
know
will
her
know the
schedule.
details. And then when Pier Paolo took over the job of being the top designer at Valentino, he came to me to do the prints, and he did ones based on my lipsticks and based on different things that I've done. One from his menswear line.
Have you done a lot of menswear?
I've done
Have
men's
you?
ties in the past
that's
and
good.
men's shirts in the hippie 60s, but I haven't done. I'll wait till I'm asked to do something again. And these are all the and then he had one based on Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. And then here are some of the stars in some of the dresses. And then this is Queen at the opening and in the film when he's wearing that outfit. And then I've gone back to recreating some of my archive collections, looking back to things that I've liked and reproduced them. And then now, as I say, you've got my 50 years in fashion and this book, which has all those 50 years, and I believe I've got some of the background in a few other books that we've got on another table at the back, and odds and ends.
This is a really beautiful book. But I have one more question, and then maybe if you'd like to answer some questions, we'll
Perfect.
figure. But you've been doing this for 50 years, and so wonderfully, and you said something before, if they ask me, I'll do it, and I'm totally impressed that you can do anything anyone asks you, which just proves
we don't know that yet. I don't know what you're asking.
I know. But I'll bet you have a few things on your bucket list that we didn't talk about. And is there anyone that you haven't met or any place that still inspires you that you haven't used yet?
I'd love to go to Peru and do all those climbs up into all those magical Machu Picchu while I can still do it. I would like to do that.
And will you start working in alpaca if you do that?
I don't know till I get there.
I bet you will. But that again is a real ethnic kind of fashion that you would see there, and I could see you
I'd love to,
motivated
and I'd like to go to Tibet before it gets totally overrun. You know, I like to do quite tough places. You know, where you aren't totally covered with civilization everywhere.
And that lets you do your creating. It's wonderful. Well, I hope that we're
But I like the desert here, so
I'm trying to think. Talk her into coming here more often. We're looking for a house. Thank you.